Your company doesn't have a safety problem. It has an operating system problem. If your company keeps having the same safety problems over and over again, you probably don't have a safety knowledge problem. You have an operating system problem. I spent more than 22 years working in EHS and operations. And one of the biggest mistakes I see companies make is assuming that poor safety performance means they need more safety activity, more training, more audits, more inspections, more policies, and worst of all, more meetings. Sometimes they do, but most companies already know the basics. They know employees need to be trained. They know incidents need to be investigated. They know corrective actions should be closed. They know equipment needs to be safe. They know and don't want people to get hurt. So the issue isn't always knowledge. The issue comes back to execution. The company hasn't translated EHS into the way the business actually runs. There's no clear ownership. There are too many priorities. There's no consistent operating rhythm. Leadership isn't looking at the right information. And somewhere along the way, the organization decided that the safety department is the one that actually owns safety. That's when the system starts to break down. I want executives to start to think about safety differently. Safety performance is an output of how your business is designed and operated. Think about it in terms of quality. If your company has recurring quality problems, you don't just tell the quality manager to go work harder or figure it out. You look at the process. You look at the equipment. You look at things like standard work. You look at supervision. You look at accountability. You look at what is being measured. You look at what happens when something starts going wrong. And then it's all hands on deck to fix the problem. Safety should work much in the same way, but in many companies it doesn't. Something happens, someone gets hurt, leadership gets concerned. Safety or EHS investigates it. We add some training. We create corrective actions. Maybe someone sends an email, if we're lucky. Then the organization slowly goes back to operating the same way it did before anything happened. And 3 months later, another version of the same issue shows up time and time again. That's not primarily a safety problem. That's a management system problem. At Fractional EHS, we call this strategy execution gap. Most companies don't have a shortage of ideas about what they should be doing. They struggle to turn those ideas into consistent execution. A company says, we need to improve incident prevention. Great. What does that actually mean? Who owns it? Who should own it? Who actually owns it? What are the 3 biggest risks? Which site is performing differently? What's actually being reviewed every single month? Which corrective actions get escalated and to who? Who's accountable when something sits open for 6 months or longer? What does the plant manager actually own? What does EHS own? What does the COO need and want to see? What if a major risk requires capital to solve for? Until those questions are answered, improved safety isn't really a strategy. It's an aspiration. And companies can't manage aspiration. They manage priorities. And those are always changing, minute to minute, day to day. They can manage owners. They manage what gets measured. They manage normal routine. And they make decisions. This is always where another problem starts. Company hires a safety professional. Great. They're going to solve all of our problems. But over time, that person starts accumulating ownership of everything. Machine guarding becomes the safety manager's issue. Forklift behavior becomes the safety manager's issue. Corrective actions become the safety manager's issue. Training becomes the safety manager's issue. Contractor management becomes the safety manager's issue. PB becomes the safety manager's issue. Eventually, that EHS professional becomes what I call a professional reminder system, right? They become a glorified babysitter because the people that should own these things don't currently take control of them, and they use safety as the crutch. They're walking around asking operations to do things the safety team is that operations should already know and should already be doing. They're sending emails, they're chasing corrective actions, they're updating spreadsheets, they're reminding supervisors, they're reminding managers, they're reminding engineering teams, and leadership starts wondering why performance isn't improving. The problem is that we've confused EHS support with operational ownership. The plant manager is the one that controls the plant. Operations controls production and the vast majority of those that are doing the work that we're trying to all impact. Supervisors control the daily work and are the extension of leadership on the floor. Engineering controls equipment design. So when there are things that need to be changed or bring new equipment in, they should own that. Maintenance controls equipment condition. Keeping things up and running and safely moving forward is an important part of maintenance. So leadership controls priorities and capital, right? So they decide what actually gets fixed, what doesn't, what improvements are made. EHS has a very important role. EHS should identify the risk proactively, design the systems, advise leaders, and be that person that leadership can look to as a technical expert. They should measure performance on your behalf. They should make it really easy for leadership to understand what's going on in the business and make decisions based off of that. And they should challenge the organization. There's always competing priority. And if somebody doesn't voice their opinion or voice their expertise, it becomes a challenge and you don't know what you should do next. And they need to escalate and have a path to escalate when necessary. But EHS cannot personally own every condition, every behavior inside of your business. And when we pretend it can, we weaken the operating system. One framework I use to evaluate companies is the EHS maturity ladder. Here are the 5 levels associated with that ladder. The first is reactive. This is where a company responds to events. Something happens and we're great about rushing in and trying to solve for the immediate issue. So you think about things like injuries, spills, releases, car accidents, customer issues, all of those things, product issues, or an insurer comes in, does an audit and raises an issue. All of those things get bubbled up and we're really good at reacting to those and going and taking care of them. But we're waiting for somebody else or something, an event to happen in order to do anything. We all know there's a tremendous amount of activity that goes in a reactive organization after something happens. But that isn't maturity. That's an activity based off of a condition or a situation that we're just responding to. The second level is compliant. And this one is almost worse in my mind. Now the company starts putting structure in place. Some programs exist. Some training happens. Required activities get tracked. So we come up with some initiatives and they're being launched and safety or somebody else is tracking them. We start to see some consistency. So normal operating rhythms are kicking in and safety is becoming part of the operations conversation. So that seems to help things get better. But compliance becomes the kind of the baseline and where we become the most complacent. We think that we're doing some things right and everybody thinks that we're moving in the right direction, but really we're just scratching the surface and doing what any normal operation would do, what we should be doing. So a company can have excellent paperwork and still have major operational risks. We see this all the time. The third level is manage. Now, the company that starts running EHS intentionally, this is different, right? You're getting to a different level of maturity. And typically what we see is on this different level of maturity, all other functions operate on a different level of maturity as well. And so there are priorities, there are owners, there are corrective actions and activities that are being tracked with due dates and owners assigned to those. Metrics are reviewed on a normal basis, and they're part of our company's KPIs and what we review as leadership on a normal basis and what we make decisions based off of. Leadership understands what's actually going on. We're no longer just maintaining programs. We're really starting to manage performance and outcomes. So the fourth level is integrated. And for a long time, as a long-time EHS professional, this is where things get really exciting. Right? To be and feel like you're part of the team and you're making a real impact and adding real value is a fantastic place for an EHS professional to be in. So this is where EHS becomes part of the whole company. Risk enters capital discussions. So people like me are sitting at the table helping prioritize what needs to get done. Plant managers are really, at the end of the day, the ones that own the overall performance and are accountable to that performance. EHS metrics sit alongside the other operating metrics. So you think about things like productivity and cost and quality. Safety has a seat at that table. Leadership reviews major exposures. Safety considerations become part of acquisitions, equipment decisions, staffing, and operating plans. EHS isn't sitting next to the operating system anymore. They're actually inside the operating system. Then you reach the fifth level. In most companies, very rarely do they get here. I've been fortunate enough to work with and work for a couple of companies that are completely proactive in their EHS management system and kind of reach the pinnacle, or we would say the top of the maturity ladder, because they become self-correcting. This is where the organization identifies problems and begins correcting them before EHS has to chase people around. Supervisors are actually, I'd say supervisors and frontline employees are actually the ones that recognize the risk. Operations, the person on the floor takes ownership and escalates it. Leaders challenge poor performance. They won't accept it in any facet of the business, and they definitely aren't going to accept it in safety. Employees are surfacing concerns, right? They want a safe workplace. They want to look out for one another, and they are not afraid to speak up and escalate things and bring ideas and bring solutions. Corrective actions move without constant intervention. You don't need a safety manager to be on your back. The team knows that they need to get this done because it's the right thing to do. The goal isn't to build a giant safety department. Actually, it's the opposite. The goal is to build an organization capable of managing the risk effectively. And here's what I see all the time. Most companies believe they're further up the ladder than they really are. Why does that happen? Because they measure activity, which is great. That's a proactive measurement, a leading measurement, and that is a good place to start. We trained 98% of our employees. It's a great metric, but are we measuring whether the behavior actually changed on the other side? We completed 600 inspections. Fantastic. But what did we learn and what did we do from those inspections? We opened 140 corrective actions. It's really easy to identify a problem. We all see them all the time. It's great that we're starting to document them. But how many of those actions are actually taken care of and corrected? We held 10 safety meetings. We all know, all have sat in tons of meetings. Are decisions getting made? Are those meetings effective? Does the team feel empowered to make change? This is where EHS dashboards and KPIs become misleading. They get one part of the puzzle, but not the other one. You can have a dashboard full of green numbers while the business still has significant unmanaged risk and still a high TRIR. An executive dashboard should help leadership make decisions and drive accountability. It should tell me where exposure is increasing, where corrective actions aren't closing, where sites are behaving differently, where claims are trending, and where we're spending money. And lastly, where leadership needs to get involved and intervene and change direction. I don't need 37 metrics. I need clarity. So how do you build this differently? Our basic operating model at fractional EHS is see it, recognize it, right? We know that there's a problem. We have to come to terms with that. Set it. We need to address it, take care of it. Run it means then once we have seen the problem, we have corrected the problem, we need an operating rhythm to manage the problem. Raise it. That's moving it to the next level. How do we move further up the hierarchy of controls, or how do we make this better? How do we automate it? How do we take care of it in a manner that makes it easier to manage and reduces the risk further? So first, see it, understand the reality. Know what the policy says, not what the dashboard implies. What's actually happening? What's actually going on? Walk the operation. Look at the incident history. Look at the claims. Talk to leadership. Most importantly, talk to the people out on the floor. They already know what needs to be done and where the problems exist. And they are almost always the people with the best and simplest ideas to reduce the risk. You need to understand the equipment, and you do that by talking to people that use it, operate it, and maintain it. Understand the processes. How do things flow through the building? Understand where serious exposure actually exists, right? We can't get everything done with limited resources. We have to prioritize. So we need to understand where everything is. Then set it. Decide what matters. You cannot have 42 priorities. Operations are already juggling priorities from all different functions. HR, finance, safety, quality. They have to prioritize, and so do we. What are the handful of issues that actually deserve executive attention? Who's going to own them? What does success look like? What actually needs capital now, and what do we need to plan for in the long term, medium term to long term future? What needs better operational discipline? And what genuinely belongs to the EHS department or person? Then run it. Create rhythm. This is the most important part of operating any business. As a business owner, this is the key. And operational rhythm is so important to making sure that these things are done and done effectively. Conduct monthly reviews, have clear owners and ownership, set due dates, and hold people to those due dates. If we cannot come up with a due date that is logical, it makes sense, and we can stick to, you need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that we're setting correct due dates, because that should be a date that we need big explanation on why we miss. Escalate. Know what your pathways are to escalate in the event you're not getting what you need. Visible measures. Make it transparent. Make it so everybody understands it. Evidence that actions are actually being completed. When you run multiple locations and multiple operations, you rely on a lot of people. So you want to know that you're aligned with what was done. This is where strategy becomes execution. Lastly, raise it. Once the foundation works, you start improving the system. Now you look at trends. You're looking at insurance spend. You're looking at KPIs and dashboards. You're getting feedback from the team. You probably have committees and safety meetings. You have things coming back from insurance. You have your EMR. You have a lot of data to make decisions based off of. But these are the total costs of risk, right? It goes far beyond just somebody getting injured in one of your facilities. Multi-site variation, capital planning, acquisition integration. This is huge. When you're integrating two businesses and two different cultures and two different ways of doing things, integrating is a chore, and it's really hard. You need somebody skilled that has the ability to integrate two businesses or multiple businesses. Leadership behavior. How are everybody showing up on the floor? Is the plant manager demonstrating what they expect from their employees? AI readiness. You won't hear any other EHS professionals talk about AI readiness in the way that we do. It gives us leverage and allows us to do our job competently and quickly. Continuous improvement, right? That's something that we should all try to live by. That's where EHS starts operating like a real business function. And this matters financially. Poorly managed EHS creates real business consequences. Workers' comp costs, insurance pressures, lost production, turnover, poor morale, poor culture, poor brand. It creates overtime. It creates additional costs, training costs, onboarding costs, HR costs, equipment downtime, management distraction. They're having to fight fires rather than run the business because of all these other variables that are coming into play. Capital surprises. If we knew the risks and knew what needed to be done and planned for it, we would never have those surprises. We would know where the money needs to be spent. Acquisition liabilities, right? You go to sell or acquire a business that has all of this risk in it, it becomes a challenge, it becomes a problem. Problems during diligence, I've seen this time and time again. Great company, great financials, really crappy safety performance, and PE groups have walked away due to that. And often the direct cost of an incident is only one piece of the total disruption to the business. That's why I want operators to stop asking, how do we improve our safety program? And really start asking themselves and the people around them, how well does our operating system identify, prioritize, and control risk? The same way that we use our operating system in the other functions of the business. That's a much better question to ask. The best companies I've worked in don't need to constantly say that safety is their number one priority. You can see it in the way that they operate. You can feel it in just one conversation. Plant managers know their risks and they own it. Supervisors own corrective actions. They don't let something sit. They care that something is out there, that it exists in the workplace that could potentially injure one of their people. And they take action because they care enough about their team to ensure that that doesn't happen. Leaders ask good questions. They want to know what's going on. They probe, they challenge, and they should. Capital decisions are considered risk. Reoccurring problems get escalated. We don't let things sit. We don't let people get hurt by the same thing over and over and over again. Metrics lead decisions instead of PowerPoint slides. And EHS operates at the right level. Sometimes that's tactical, which that's okay. There's compliance matters that need to be taken care of. Sometimes that's strategic. And that's where we struggle. If you have not sat in the strategic EHS role, it becomes really challenging. As a doer, as a compliance person, you're accustomed to doing, not thinking about the bigger picture. And that's why people like me are really important to an organization's overall success. Sometimes sitting with a COO discussing claims, acquisitions, and organizational design, or even capital. That's what integration looks like. So if you're running a company where you're constantly retraining people, reopening the same corrective actions, asking your EHS team why nothing seems to stick, challenge the assumption that you have a safety problem. You may have a translation problem. You know what needs to happen. It just has been translated into the operating system of the business. Build ownership, set priorities, create operating rhythm, measure what matters, give leaders visibility and transparency, and build an organization capable of correcting itself. That's how EHS becomes part of the business instead of department sitting beside. I'm Corey Robinson, founder of Fractional EHS, longtime EHS professional, and somebody that is dedicated to this craft and has worked at all levels within the business in an EHS profession, from senior director and head of EHS and strategy and sustainability and other functions, all the way down to the engineer conducting your routine audits. So if you have any of these challenges, you want to talk strategy, please feel free to book a 15-minute call. We're happy to sit down and talk with anybody in the space. Really what we're trying to do is drive value and reduce risk for all of you. So thank you for listening and hope to talk soon.